Our State of the Program series takes us to College Station out at Aggie Land. The A&M Aggies coming off of a college football playoff appearance. Is this a get-back year? Can they get back to the college football playoff, or are they in for a rebound year? Let's find out. Welcome on inside the Southern sports scene. Make sure you all do us a favor. Hit the like, share, and subscribe button down below. Turn on the bell notifications so that you are notified every time we go live, posting a video or posting a short on the Southern sports scene. As always, we want to thank our good friends and partners over at Frost Buddy. Going over to frostbuddy.com, use the promo code SSS15 to get 15% off your first purchase. That's code SSS15 to get 15% off your first purchase. We also want to thank our good friends and partners over at Chike Nutrition. With 20 grams of protein, 1 gram of fat, 1 gram of sugar, every cup of iced hot coffee, iced or hot coffee, can get consumed by yourself, and you can get every day started with a healthy, hearty, good cup of coffee. Click the link below to get 10% off. And we also want to thank our friends at Buzzer for allowing us to partner with them and have our videos and live streams be featured there. Download the Buzzer app to see if you can become a verified creator today. Got Jay Arnold with us, part of the Aggie Ward pod, as part of Dave Campbell's Texas Football, also the host of The Get Back Coach. Jay, appreciate your time, man. Welcome on into the Southern sports scene. How are you?
I'm doing all right. Yeah, appreciate you having me on. Excited to finally get out of the doldrums of off season and ready to see the guys hit the field.
So you come off of a college football playoff appearance this past season, and it's a year where expectations were pretty much exceeded. You beat Notre Dame, you go to South Bend, and you knock off a then top 10 Notre Dame team. The rest of the way, you're pretty much dominant. You go to Baton Rouge, you beat LSU. You go to Fairfield Field, which is an underrated environment. You beat Missouri. You survive against South Carolina, and then the wheels kind of fall off the train during the last 2 games of the season. Just kind of discuss last year as a whole, just what led to the rise and how this offense was this past season with Marcel Reed in his second full year, or really his first full year as the starting quarterback.
Yeah, I think it's 3 key pieces there. You had a very experienced offensive line in front of them. A lot of guys with a lot of experience in the program, and I think that continuity makes a big difference for an offensive line protecting their quarterback. I think you also have to look at Marcel Reed's growth as a passer and the fact that he has another year in the system to develop and kind of improve there, mature, become that leader that the offense needed. And then you also just have to look at the receiver room. The big additions with Casey Concepcion and Mario Craver last year, I think gave that receiver room a level of explosion and yards after catch ability, especially that had been missing from that room previously. And all 3 of those factors came together to really improve the offense, an offense that wasn't able to stretch the field. Obviously, you have those kind of threats and combine that with Marcel's running ability, which we already knew about. And it opens up the opportunity to really expand your game. And I think that's why we saw A&M have much more success offensively last year.
You lose Colin Klein, who's now the head coach over at Texas A&M. Holman Wiggins is now the full-time OC. Talk to me about this offense with Wiggins as the primary play caller now. And how is that? Do you think that this takes like a hit on Marcel Reed's game?
You know, I'm not really sure what this offense is going to look like, just to be 100% transparent, because we had Colin Klein the past 2 years. We know what Colin Klein's bread and butter is, right? He's been a Kansas State guy his whole life, grew up in that kind of physical running offense. Obviously, you have some of the passing concepts mixed in, but you also have things like QB power. You have some of the pin and pull game that was used in that offense. Holman Wiggins has a few more offensive studies to pull from, right? Like he's not a one tree guy. And so that makes me a little intrigued to see like what different concepts we're going to see in the offense this year. Do we keep it simple? Is he going to mix in some things that we didn't see under Colin Klein? I'm really more concerned about the offensive line as far as Marcel Reed taking a step back. But I think anytime you have turnover from the coordinator positions, you have to worry about that too. So if I'm a fan, I'm cautiously optimistic just to see what Holman Wiggins brings. But I'm also knowing that anytime a young athlete has that kind of change, there's the potential for issues to crop up, differences in terminology, differences in the scheme, differences in the route tree. All of that has to come to mind. With
Right.
that being said, with this being internal and Holman Wiggins having familiarity with Colin Klein's offense, I think you're going to see a little bit of a blending going on that makes the transition a little bit easier.
Both sides of the line of scrimmage took a hit. You lose nearly your entire starting defensive line from last year, nearly your entire starting offensive line from this past year. Got some hits early on in recruiting for the class of 27 going and beyond. But just talk about, from both sides of the line of scrimmage, from your perspective, what have you heard and or seen throughout spring? Has anyone emerged as a guy that you could say, hey, this is a guy that we really are sleeping on this year? I think he's going to be a really solid piece that is just going to transition fluidly. It's almost like there's going to be no change at all, which is hard to say knowing that this was arguably one of the better offensive lines that Texas A&M has had in recent memory from this past season.
Yeah, I mean, I think you have to go back to like 2012 when Luke Jokel, Jake Matthews, Cedric Abwehi, and Jarvis Harrison were there to really find an offensive line that was as good as and experienced as what A&M had last year. And now you lose a lot of pieces, and it's not just the starters, but you lose some guys that rotated into. I mean, you start with Trey Zune at the left tackle position, who also played a little bit of center at times. I mean, Armaja Reed Adams, Ruben Fathery, Demetrius Crownover, Chase Basantis. Like you lose that many names from the offensive line. The only guy they really have coming back that played significant amount last year was Mark Naboo, who will be back at center. And I will say that if you're going to pick one position along the offensive line, with that center being like the quarterback of that unit, that's probably the guy that you want to have the most snaps back. A&M also hit the transfer portal pretty hard on that offensive line. I mean, you look across the two deep and you see guys like Tyree Adams, Cone Eccles, Wilkin Formby that have come in from within the SEC to kind of bolster this offensive line. But I'm looking at this, and I think that Martin Naboo has to be the guy that steps up, just because he's the one with the most familiarity with the system, with the quarterback, to be that leader on the offensive front. On the defensive side of the ball, I don't think the continuity is necessarily as important and as much of a struggle. And a guy that I'm just fired up that A&M was able to grab in the transfer portal is Yanto Saka, just an athletic freak from Northwestern. Does a lot of things great in his game, and I expect him to have a fantastic season, making the transition from the Big Ten to the SEC and what he's able to bring athletically. But I want to keep an eye on Marco Jones too. He was an edge rusher that really flashed last year at times when Cassius Howe wasn't in there, and I think he's a guy that can surprise some people this year.
Looking at the offensive side of the ball, at the skill position, you brought in Isaiah Horton from Alabama. You return guys like Mario Craver. I'm still waiting on Terry Bussey to break out this past season, who had some moments this past year. Ashton Bethel Roman is, my opinion, going to be the X factor this year. Guy that averaged almost 25 yards a catch from this season. Who has emerged, in your opinion, apart from Mario Craver, who's probably the obvious number one receiver, maybe that number two guy?
Yeah, I think Isaiah Horton is probably the name, and it's a little bit of a boring pick because he's so heralded out of the transfer portal. But one thing I would say is from last season, Mario Craver, Casey Concepcion are both similar guys, right? They're quicker, really good at getting out of the breaks and getting yards after catch. Isaiah Horton is a tall burner, right? He's a guy that's really going to take the top off the defense, but also with that 6'4", with that height, he's going to go up and get those jump balls. I think that was an element that was maybe missing a little bit from this offense last year. And you mentioned Terry Bussey. I think he's a guy that had a really good spring. A lot of people forget that this is a guy that didn't play as much receiver. He came in recruited as a DB. right? And then due to some things that happened in his freshman year, he ends up playing mostly receiver. Obviously, focused on that position last year, and now, I mean, he's still 19 years old, right? And I think a lot of people are worried about him not having hit that real star potential yet. But as young as he is, and as young as he is, coming from a level of competition, right? Very small school Texas. I think it just takes time to adjust. So Terry Bussey's a guy I really like too. And then another guy kind of deeper in the roster that I think could have a breakout if he can stay healthy is Jerome Miles, who dealt with an injury last year, wasn't really able to see the field. He's a guy that was very highly recruited and I think could, flash given the chance in this offense.
Interesting. Yeah, I think Terry Bussey at this point in time, do you expect him to move back to DB, or is this solid? He's wide receiver at this point.
Yeah, at this point, he is just a wide receiver. I don't see him playing both ways. I think very few and far between are the players who can do that. Like the fact that Travis Hunter was able to do it, especially at a place like Colorado where you have to deal with the elevation aspect of the cardio too, blows my mind. But I think Terry Bussey is just going to be locked in at receiver moving forward.
Figured so. What has impressed you most about Marcel Reed from this past offseason? Obviously the turnovers played a big role the last 2 games of the season, 4 interceptions, 0 touchdowns in the last 2 games and the 2 losses. Just what have you seen that you think he's going to elevate his game going into this year?
Yeah, I think you just look at the processing speed from the quarterback position. I think, his first year, it was a lot of relying on his athleticism and his legs. Last year, he definitely slung the ball around a little bit more. I think this year, and from what we've seen in the spring, he's just gotten a little bit better at that processing, but also mixing it in more, right? Like using that running ability, and he used it great in the LSU game, to be fair. But I think you're going to see him use his legs a little bit more, but also just doing a good job of not getting too much into the tendencies, right? Like not making those mistakes or getting those tells that allow defenses to really key in on him and force those turnovers. I think that's kind of the next step in the evolution of his game.
When you look at the defensive side of the ball, and I know you briefly mentioned some names early on in the year or in our video, the back 7 should be pretty interesting in my opinion. Obviously, the front 5 or the front 7 is going to be the biggest concern in my opinion, but you do return guys that I think could take a step up this year. Sam and Pemba, I would expect to get some more playing time. You mentioned Antosaka, who's a phenomenal edge rusher, a guy that I think could eventually get himself into the conversation of all SEC type of edge player. Dalton Brooks is a guy that's been there for 4 years. Julian Humphrey is a guy from Georgia. The Des Ricks is a guy that I've been really, really enjoyed watching early on whenever he was coming out of high school. Haven't yet seen him take that next step forward as an elite DB, but there's obviously a lot of ball left to play for him. Who stood out to you the most on this defensive side of the ball?
Yeah, and this is a really unfortunate thing that he suffered an injury in the spring game, so we're kind of worried about how he's going to be coming back. But Damian Sanford at the linebacker spot, the really going to be more of like a will linebacker. He was a guy that just showed up so much towards the end of last season, really made some plays, and is expected to take a step forward again. You don't know how it's going to be after he got injured in that spring game, which is really unfortunate. But I think he's a guy that you're expecting to take on a heavy bit of the load, because you lose a couple guys in the linebacker room in Scooby Williams and Torian York, who had carried the torch, so to speak, for the past couple years. And this felt like this was going to be the Damian Sanford coming out party. Obviously, he got a lot of playing time with Scooby Williams being injured last year, but it really felt like he was set to come into his own. I'm still of the belief that he's primed for just a major breakout campaign this year, even with the fact that he's coming back from injury. But I also think having a guy in Ray Coney, the Tulsa transfer, next to him in the linebacker room is going to be helpful as well. I watched Ray Coney in that Tulsa upset of Oklahoma State, and that dude was all over the field making plays. A player that I was really excited for them to get, considering maybe a lack of experience in the linebacker room.
What is the addition of a guy like Travis Williams, who's now your assistant head coach and linebackers coach? What does that mean for your group?
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see how that goes. Obviously, some of the A&M fans weren't super happy with Jay Bateman, and they were excited to get a new name in there. I don't think it'll change the system too much, just because this is always going to be a Mike Elko defense. Like, he's going to have his fingerprints all around it. But sometimes just getting a new guy in there can help to gin up some energy. Right. And I think Travis Williams is a guy that's going to bring that. Excited to see how that reflects in the play on Saturdays.
I really like T. Will. Been following him since 24 with Arkansas. Really love his play style. I think he's a phenomenal position coach. I think he got thrown into a really bad situation at Arkansas where recruiting-wise it was just piss poor, in my opinion. But I think he's leading a really good linebacking room. I know Damian Sanford, from what Elko has said, he is going to play this year. It's just a matter of when. So just, do you have a timeline at this point in time of when he could return, or is it still it's a crapshoot?
Yeah, I think it's a crapshoot, and the coaches these days are so cagey about the injuries to just kind of keep everybody as much as they can under wraps. I mean, you have the injury reports now, which we didn't have back in my day, that have changed things a little bit, but coaches are still so cagey with everything. You hope, if you're an Aggie fan, that he gets on the field sooner rather than later, because I think he's going to be a major key piece. But it's up in the air right now.
So when you look at this schedule early on, what is probably the game, in your opinion, that could define Texas A&M season this year?
I think going back to LSU for the second year in a row, obviously there's been some changes in scheduling with now 9 conference games, and that gets kind of flipped on its head. LSU is going to be very challenging with Lane Kiffin at the helm. We know that. Everybody knows how much talent that program always brings in, no matter who's heading it up. And having to go back to Death Valley is something that, you never want to go there twice in a row.
Right.
Just such a tough place to win at. In fact, last year was the first time A&M has won at Death Valley since joining the SEC. So I think this is a game that can really define it. I will say, I think there's a bit of an element where Lane Kiffin is going back to Ole Miss either the week before or the week after, which could kind of cast a different light on that game, and allow for a bit of a maybe not as much of a revenge factor for LSU, knowing that that's looming. But I think that is, you look at the first 4 games of the season, really set the tone. That's the one that I'm like, you got to put your best foot forward in that.
I would say that Arizona State game in week 2 could be interesting. I think Arizona State got some really good pieces from the transfer portal, really solid receiving core. I think Cutter Boley, in a better system this year, is going to take a step forward. I know that he struggled with turnovers this past year, but I really do believe that he's going to elevate his game this year. I think if you get a massive win there, which I would expect you to, I think A&M goes throughout the rest of the year. They start SEC play again against Kentucky the very next week. I think you handle business there. And then that Baton Rouge road test again, I got to give the advantage to A&M. Until I see a Blake Baker defense be able to shut down a mobile quarterback consistently. Marcel Reed has 5 rushing touchdowns against LSU in 2 games. I just don't know if the offensive line is going to hold up the same. This is obviously a different LSU offense than we saw the last 2 seasons. But the concern is still there whenever you have a guy like Marcel Reed, who's been so elusive and so dangerous when he gets outside the pocket. When Blake Baker has to prep against somebody like him, you have to maintain in gap integrity. You got to maintain your pursuit angle. You got to maintain just the little things when it comes to prepping for a guy like him. I mean, you know this, obviously. We talked before the show even started. Zone reads against Nick Marshall. And, I mean, that's not fun. I had zone reads against Brian Thomas. And there's been plenty of other great athletes that you have to prepare really well against. Marcel Reed, it's not like Marcel Reed's just another running back playing quarterback. He's a really, really elusive guy. And you can never really count him out, despite what people may say about his arm. I mean, he's still a guy that's throwing over 60% completion percentage. It's not like he's a bad passer at all, but you got to maintain integrity when it comes to preparing for a guy like him.
Yeah, always a challenge to try to corral a mobile quarterback. And to your point, right? He's not a guy that you can just say make him beat us in the air because he has that completion percentage. Obviously, again, Marcel has to cut back on the turnovers, but very dangerous player. And we just don't know what to expect from LSU. But we know that Death Valley is always going to be jumping and always going to be a tough place to play.
Jay Arnold of the Aggie War part of Dave Campbell's Texas Football, also the host over at the Get Back Coach, also does some pretty good work over at Good Bull Hunting, talking Texas and A&M Aggie football. Jay, where else can we find some of your great work that you do as part of the Dave Campbell Texas Football Network and the other ventures that you have?
Yeah, kind of all over the place. I think you mostly covered it. If you are a NASCAR fan, I do a little bit of that content over at Apollo too. But yeah, for all the college football stuff, Good Bull Hunting, Dave Campbell's, and then the Get Back Coach podcast. We cover a lot of stuff through those. Always happy to talk ball, so feel free to hit us up anytime you want.
What do you think about the Brickyard 400 that's coming up?
We'll see how it goes. They're bringing a new right side tires. Interested to see what the fall off looks like. Obviously, Indy is known as a track that really eats the tires up. Big win for Bubba Wallace here last year. That was really fun to see. But man, I'm looking at the momentum that Penske has winning the last two races, and I think you look at a guy like Austin Cindric, who's grown up around this track. I expect him to be competitive. I just think Blaney's the class of the field right now, and if the Fords were a little bit better, he would be atop the points battle. I still think he has enough to get it done at Indy.
Does that momentum carry him over to next month going into Coke Zero?
I think so. Especially with how well the Fords work together at those drafting tracks.
Going to be a fun year for Texas A&M. Jay Arnold, former Texas A&M defensive lineman himself, joining us here as part of our State of the Program series. Make sure you go ahead, follow him over on the socials at JArnoldTX. That's Texas, if you didn't know that. But guys, thank you for tuning in to the Southern Sports Scene. Make sure you do us a favor. Hit the like, share, and subscribe button down below. Turn on the bell notifications so that you are notified every time we go live, post a new video or post a new short on the Southern Sports Scene. Thank you all for watching. Stay blessed. Don't stress.